Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemens, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We are live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're live on the radio at 98.7 Walk by Faith at 1420 AM, 987radio.com. We're on all of our social media pages, the Rock Health and Wellness Center on Facebook, at Health from the Rock on YouTube, and Jason Clemens, DC on X. Hope you guys had a great day. We had a great day at the Rock, just like always. Hey, I hope last night's show was cool. I hope you enjoyed us breaking all that stuff down. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. It's a lot of fun when you really get into the literature and you start looking at the different research that's being done. And we're going to do a little bit of that tonight. So we're going to get into concussions. You know, I say on the show all the time, what I've learned over the years is that what happens in the body is secondary to what happens in the brain. It's like if you have a knee problem, it's because something happened in the brain first before you had a knee problem, or a disc problem in your low back. It was your brain first, then it was the disc problem. And I know that's hard to understand sometimes. It's like, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't understand what you're saying. And it was really funny. I was having a conversation with somebody this week, and they said something about diabetes. It was really cute. It was a young girl, and she said something about diabetes, and she was like, "Well, how do you know that I don't have diabetes?" And I said, "Well, because I've seen your blood work, and I've seen your A1C and your glucose, and I know you don't have diabetes." And she's like, "Well, what is diabetes anyway?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's exactly right." I was like, and I said, "That's the hardest thing about working with people in health is that we have definitions of, or we heard these words before. We've heard these words, and we have about one sentence of depth on them, and then after that, it just all falls apart. That's the way I felt about COVID. That's what I actually told the mayor. Is he said, I would love to sit here all afternoon and discuss the science with you. And I said, I would like to discuss the science for 3 sentences. I don't think you've got 3 sentences that will hold up. Your whole argument will fall apart after 3 sentences. And what's happening today, right? What are we finding out about all this stuff? It's exactly the truth. Like it didn't hold up for 3 sentences. And I know personally that I've got a lot of subjects that are like that. I know a little bit about a lot of subjects. I know very little about. I know a whole lot about very little, and so I feel that way a lot. It's like you can get me to the end of my knowledge in about 3 sentences on a lot of subjects. Some of the subjects I can't even get to 3 sentences, like electricity. I don't understand electricity. I don't understand cars, motors, and engines and all that stuff. Can't talk to you about them at all. People they talk to me about them. I'm like, I don't even understand what that means. It's like, I can't talk to you about it at all. But so when we're talking about something that is this complicated, and we say, hey, look, what happens in your brain, it happens in your brain first before it happens in your body. And that's what I want to go into that a little bit tonight. And some of it's going to be a little rough because I've got a great article. It was really cool. I was looking through Instagram or YouTube or something last night, and I heard this guy say this about concussions and orthopedic knee problems, like torn ACLs and concussions. And so, and he actually made a post. I don't even remember where it was, but I went down in the comments and I read what he talked about and the authors. And so I just went and Googled it and I found it. And so when I did, I was like, okay, that's exactly the truth. Like that's what we say on the show. So that's what we're going to get into tonight. I found my neurology notes that from Dr. Hall's seminar when we went through the functional neurology program. I found my notes, and it'll be a little rough as we go through it because I'm just going to read through my notes and highlight some of the big things that support this idea that we're talking about, or explain it. And so we're going to do that tonight. So conversations we had in the office today. One of the conversations we had in the office was about the function of the feet and what's going on in the calf. And we're working on strengthening the calf muscle of one particular patient to try to help the function of the feet. And she reached down behind her knee and she said, "Is this where it should be sore?" And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am. That's exactly the right spot right there." Like that whole calf. But you'll get that tibialis posterior, and you'll get that tibialis anterior. Those are muscles that are in the lower part of your leg that are have a relationship with the foot and the action of the foot and the arch itself. And so you might not think about that. You might not think that the muscles right just underneath your knee, like within an inch or 2 inches from your knee, actually have something to do with your feet. But they do. That all those most of your if you look at a foot of a cadaver and you really break it down, the majority of that foot and ankle is tendons. Like there's not a lot. There's muscles on your foot, but the majority of the muscles that have to do with supination and pronation, or the rotation of your foot in and out, or picking your toes up or pointing your toes down, most of those muscles are in your calf or around in your lower limb just below your knee. And then the tendons run all the way down to the foot. And so if you're having feet problems, then strengthening those calves are something that might help you out. So that's one of the conversations that we had today. It was really cool because we had some really stressed people this week. We had several people that were going through some really tough times, and we got to address some of those issues with them as well. Some of the strategies that they can use, because remember, it's physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress that causes the subluxation. It's not just physical stress. It's not just the fact that you and your daughter were carrying away a tree. That happened this week. You and your daughter were carrying away a tree branch that had fallen down from the storm, and then your daughter slipped and it fell out of her hands first, and then the tree branch hit you in the hip. I had that happen this week. That's physical stress, right? That's not chemical stress. That's not mental emotional stress. That's just straight up physical stress. And that's the thing that in chiropractic people, they get that really easy. They're like, "Oh yeah, man, I hurt my back. I slipped and fell." One of my ladies slipped and fell going down the steps. She was carrying her laptop and a glass of water, and she was coming down the steps, and she missed the step, and she fell right on her tailbone. And so those are physical stressors. That doesn't have anything to do with the chemical stressors. Now, does the chemical stressors and the mental emotional stressors have an impact on the result of the fall, or how your body handles the fall, or how you define the fall? Yes. But the actual fall itself is a physical stress, right? But you can't just ignore the chemical and the mental emotional. Chemical is mostly the food that we eat, and then the chemicals that are in our environment, and all this chemical that's sprayed on stuff around here. All the kind of chemicals, plastic. One of my ladies was talking about cooking meat. She was talking about a type of cooking, sous vide. I don't know. I've never heard it before. You guys might be able to tell me that. You can text me 806-794-0400. You can leave me a message. I'll see if I can find that. Yeah, sous vide. I know you guys. It's also known as low temperature, long time cooking, is a method of cooking invented by the French chef Georges Pralus, in 1974, in which food is placed in a plastic pouch or a glass jar and cooked in a water bath for longer than usual cooking times as precisely regulated temperatures. The temperature is much lower than usual, used for cooking, typically around 55 to 60 degrees Celsius for red meat and 66 to 71 for poultry or higher. So, sous vide, I don't know how you say that. Um, she was explaining that to me, and I said, You've exceeded the culture of this old boy from Roswell. I don't know what that is. I never heard of that before. She's like, well, you cook it in a bag. And I said, what kind of bag? She said, a plastic bag. And I'm just like, no. Don't throw a plastic bag in hot water. Like, that's not a good idea. That's chemical stress. You don't want those plastics leaching into that steak and eating that plastic. So it was really funny. And do we all do that at some time? Yeah, if you drink coffee out of a Starbucks cup, the plastic lid, or you make coffee at home in a Keurig, you're heating up all that plastic. You put Tupperware in a microwave, you're heating up all that plastic. A lot of times we do it, but I'll tell her. It says because you can also put it in a glass jar. So she said, "What can I cook it with? You're not supposed to get those steaks wet." I said, well, not a plastic bag. Maybe you're gonna have to skip that kind of cooking, or you could get you a Traeger grill and it'll do that for you. But anyway, all right, that's a chemical stress. Is my point. Those are chemical stresses, but there's also mental emotional stresses, and mental emotional stresses break down the body. Mental emotional stresses cause them. I mean, you say, how does that work, Jason? Like, what do you mean if I'm stressed out, I could have back pain? Well, if you're stressed out, then you have a brain, and it has a right side and a left side. And then you have vertebra, and then you have a sacrum at the bottom, and then you have a right arm and a left arm, and then you have muscles. You have these transverse processes, and then you have a disc in between all that. We're going to talk about that tonight on the show, so this really makes a lot of sense. And then you have a bunch of muscles that are attached all the way down, and those muscles and then you have transverse to transverse, and then you have spinous to spinous. You got some big ones on top of that. What you also have is cerebellum. And so, what does stress do? Stress fires the right hemisphere. Stress fires the right hemisphere. Stress increases the sympathetic response. The sympathetic response is the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response fires down to the adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland releases cortisol. Caitlin was showing me some supplement drink last night that's supposed to really help your cortisol. Like, Dad, check this out. What is it? It was magnesium and like there was several different L-theanine or something. I don't know. That there were several things in it, and it was supposed to help your cortisol. It's supposed to help you relax a little bit, help you. And then high cortisol equals low metabolism. So if you're stressed out, you're having low metabolism. You can't lose weight because you're stressed out, right? So this whole thing, cortisol also turns off the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is responsible for all these intrinsic muscles all the way through here. So what happens is you turn down the cerebellum, and now you lose all this proprioception coming from your spine, and now your spine's not functioning properly, and now you lean over to pick something up and you hurt your back. And it's not a physical trauma, and it's not a chemical trauma, it's a mental emotional trauma. And a lot of times we carry that stress in our neck. We say, well, it's just killing me. My neck is just killing me right there. Why? Because it's hard to hold our head up. Why? Because our frontal lobe is exhausted. And when our frontal lobe gets exhausted, it doesn't inhibit the flexor muscles. So now your head tends to go more into flexion with your head down, your head forward, and your head down. And now you put this biomechanical load on your neck, and it makes your traps sore and the levator scapula and the muscles in your neck. And it's just like forward head posture in stress. You just sit there, you just slouch and sit there, and you don't feel like sitting up straight. You don't fire your extensor muscles, and you cause yourself some trouble, right? And that all that trouble is from the mental emotional aspect of it. So you need tools to deal with mental emotional stress. That's where they come in and say, well, man, it's like you're a counselor too. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not a counselor. I'm just trying to address your mental emotional stress. It's part of my job in detecting and correcting vertebral subluxation or subluxation period, interference in the nervous system, is to try to look at physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. And then what's going to happen if you get stressed out? Then you're going to have this decrease of dopamine, and then you're going to want to drink a Dr. Pepper. You're going to want to eat half a pint of ice cream, right? Like that's what we talk about. We all know those things happen. It's like we see the movies and the girl's all depressed and she's sitting in there and she's eating a half a pint of ice cream or whatever, half a gallon of ice cream. It's like, yes, why? Because she's stressed out. So we've had some physical trauma, we've had some chemical trauma that are problems, and we've had some mental emotional stuff going on this week. So I'll just say this before we get into the article. If you're having mental emotional stress this week, let me just tell you, you're not alone. Okay? You're not alone. There's a lot of it going on out there. There's a lot of things happening. It's summertime and people are trying to do stuff and move and shake and do all the stuff that they do. And we're dealing with storms in Lubbock and there's that stuff. Everybody's got something different. We're going through divorces, having trouble in your business, whatever it might be, right? Well, I had a nurse tell me this morning that she said she's really not as busy as normal. She works over in the emergency room. She said, we're not as busy as normal. And she said, and I was like, I wonder why that is. She said, well, we don't have near as many respiratory problems right now as we did in the winter. And I was like, I was kind of egging it on a little bit. I was like, I wonder why that is. And she's like, I don't know. I think maybe because kids are in school. And I said, well, that might be that. Might be because they're in school. And I said, it also might be because they have low vitamin D in the winter and they don't have that problem in the summer. And then she said, well, one of the things that we have an increase of in the summer is suicide or suicide attempts. And I thought, dang, that's not good. We don't want to trade respiratory problems for suicide attempts. And so it was like, nah, we don't want to do that. And so I was just thinking about that. And, we're out of our routine. We're probably not getting on our feet. She's talking about kids mostly, but let me just say this. If you're stressed out, you're not alone. And if you want some help with that, you can give me a call or a text, some sort of message, or you can go see your counselor, get some help. Go find a friend, do something, and get some help with that. We can all get through it. And that's my encouragement of the evening. So let's get into this article because this is really cool, right? What is the argument? Or not an argument. What's the statement? What have you heard me say multiple times that, and I got this from Dr. Hall, okay? Musculoskeletal problems, orthopedic problems are secondary to brain. Okay? What happens in your brain precedes what happens in your body. So I was watching this last night. I saw I don't even know the guy. I wish I could because I give him credit, but I don't remember where I got it from. It was just one of those feeds, reels that came through there. The guy said it. I looked in the comments to find the article, and what did I find? Here's the article that I found right here. It's really cool. And this is National Library of Medicine. This is PubMed right here. This is musculoskeletal injury risk after sports-related concussion, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So the title of the article is Musculoskeletal Injury Risk After Sports-Related Concussion. And this was the American Journal of Sports Medicine 2019, June of 2019. American Journal of Sports Medicine. McPherson is the lead author on this. And that's how I found it. So I just typed in McPherson, and I found it. So let's go through it. Clinical management of sports-related concussions typically involve a symptom checklist, clinical examination of mental status, a neurocognitive testing. However, recent studies have identified unresolved, impaired sensorimotor function after athletes return to sports. A review and meta-analysis of all current literature regarding risk of subsequent musculoskeletal injury after concussion has yet to be published in the medical literature. But this is going back to 2019, right? So what are they saying right there? That recent studies have identified unresolved, impaired sensorimotor function after their return to sports. So these kids are returning to sports and still have impairment in the way that their body is talking to each other. Sensory motor, we're getting input from the body into the brain. We're getting output from the brain down to the body. Okay, so we're trying to figure it out. To determine the odds that athletes will sustain musculoskeletal injury after concussion, it was hypothesized a priori that concussions would increase the risk of musculoskeletal injury. So they did a study. They did a PubMed and Google Scholar research from January 2000 to November of 2017. Reference lists of the included studies were manually searched. 2 reviewers independently researched the literature for studies published in English that reported musculoskeletal injury after athletes returned to play following a concussion. I want us to stop for just a second and really think about what it is that this is saying. And we're talking about sports, but it applies across the board. That what they're looking for right here is any article that reported musculoskeletal injury after the athletes returned to play following a concussion. Following a concussion that changed the way that the brain is functioning, what they were looking for is, did these people have some sort of musculoskeletal problem after that? Did they have some sort of knee injury? That's what the video I was watching last night that caught my attention said. It said that the increase in knee injuries after a concussion. And so what I want us to do is I want us to take the information from the article, and then I want us to apply it to just brain and joint. Brain first, joint second. Brain first, joint second. Not the other way around. Brain first, right? Okay. 2 independent reviewers completed data extraction, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. Observed cohort, cross-sectional, blah, blah, blah. National Institutes of Health. Random effect, meta-analysis. The primary study outcome of interest was the number of athletes who sustained musculoskeletal injury after concussion. Here's the results right here. 8 studies met inclusion criteria for meta-analysis. Meta-analysis results indicated that athletes who had a concussion had 2 times greater odds of sustaining musculoskeletal injuries than athletes without a concussion. In addition, athletes with concussion demonstrated a higher incidence of musculoskeletal injury after return to sport compared with non-concussed athletes. Further analysis showed that both male and female athletes with concussion were at an increased risk of musculoskeletal injury compared with their respective same-sex non-concussed controls. So the conclusion of the article, based on the evidence of higher risk of musculoskeletal injury after concussion, standard clinical assessments for athletes with concussion should include not only physical symptoms and cognitive function before returning to sports, but also neuromuscular risk factors associated with increased risk for musculoskeletal injuries. So there's a lot right there there's a lot that we can break down, and I really we're going to have a break here in just a second, but I want to break down a couple of these sentences so that we can really understand that. It's like that these guys had a concussion, they got released, they got allowed to go back into sports, and then they were, what does it say, a two-time, they were twice conclusion results indicate that athletes who had a concussion had 2 times greater odds of sustaining musculoskeletal injuries than athletes without a concussion. Why? Why would it be that way? Why would that be a thing? Why would you blow your knee out? Why would you tear your ACL? 2 times more likely to tear your ACL if after you've had a concussion than before you had a concussion. Are you telling me that the way the brain functions and the way the brain communicates with the quad and the hamstring and the soleus and the gastroc and all the muscles that are related to the knee, you're telling me that if the brain and the body are not connecting to each other and you put the body into some sort of activity, that you might overload the body to the point where you would tear the ligament in the knee? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. That is truth, and this is what this article is saying. So we're going to take a break right now, and then when we get back from the break, we'll break a couple of these sentences down, and then I want to start going through some of these neurological notes to explain exactly why that's the case. And maybe I think when we get done, you'll have a better understanding that, man, I got to keep my brain functioning so that my body functions as well. We'll be right back. You guys stick around with us. Hey, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, we got some comments last night. Send them to me. If you want to know where this article came from, I just Googled it. Musculoskeletal injury after sports-related concussion. McPherson, McPherson, was the lead person on that. And back in 2019. So if you're interested in that, if you got any things you'd like to cover on the show, please let me know. I'd be glad to take a look at any of this stuff that's on your mind. If you hear something on the show that you don't understand and you think, he lost me on that part, I hope that you'll send it to me. I was having a conversation last night after the show about, some of the things that we talk about in the show and how they show up in real life, like too much flexion in the lumbar spine and how it puts pressure on the disc and it makes the disc bulge. Right? Those are real life things, and I try to make sure that what we're talking about on the show is real life stuff. That it's like you want to know. It's kind of like the conversation I had with the young girl about the diabetes, right? She's interested, but she doesn't have enough depth of knowledge to be able to navigate her way through that, like whether or not she has diabetes or she doesn't. And it's like, well, then she's like, well, what is diabetes? I'm like, well, okay, then these are real life situations. You may have, in this particular case that we're talking about tonight, your shoulder doesn't work right. Like you're having shoulder pain. You're having hip degeneration. You're having knee problems. And wouldn't it be really interesting if you were really concerned about having Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's, and you could get a clue about how your brain was working based on the fact that you're having shoulder, hip, or knee problems or foot problems? Like your joints are not functioning properly, your orthopedics are not functioning properly, and maybe that's a sign that your brain's not functioning properly, and you may be headed towards Alzheimer's or dementia. Wouldn't you want to know that? Hey, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We are talking about what's going on in the brain and what's going on in the body, and how there's a connection, and which one happens first, right? And the article we're talking about, and the article we found, is making the statement, the results. Athletes who had a concussion had 2 times greater odds of sustaining musculoskeletal injury than athletes without a concussion. In addition, athletes with concussion demonstrated a higher incidence of musculoskeletal injury after return to sport compared with non-concussed athletes. I mean, that's pretty obvious. It's basically the same sentence. Athletes with concussion demonstrated a higher incidence of musculoskeletal injuries after return to sport. And then the last one is, further analysis showed that both male and female athletes with concussion were at an increase of risk of musculoskeletal injury compared with their respective same-sex non-concussed control. Take 2 kids that have a concussion. Where would a women get concussion? What's the sports? If you go through women's sports, you look at soccer, you look at softball. Soccer is one of the big ones. Hitting the ball in the air with your head is a big way to get a concussion. That's one of them. Obviously running into somebody. The other one is falling and hitting your head on the ground. And one of the big relationships that there is in concussions is the strength of the neck. If you've got a weak neck and you can't hold your head up, you ever seen like a little baby that they just flopping their head around? You pick them up and their head just flops all around because they don't have any strength in their neck. Well, a concussion is the brain hitting the inside of the skull from this fast acceleration, deceleration, whiplash type situation. So anytime you fall down, didn't we see I saw some video of some guy trying to stop an ICE agent, like he's out in the middle of the road running backwards with his hands on the front of the hood, and then he finally gets his feet caught up and trips and falls backwards and whiplashes himself, and apparently he died. It's like that's what I'm talking about. That type of trauma that can happen in any of the sports. I mean, it's not just football. Cheerleading is another big one. Dance or cheerleading, where you might fall from a pyramid or fall from some sort of flip or whatever. I had one of my patients last week tell me that they were doing head springs. And I was like, what in the heck is a head spring? And she said, well, you do a headstand, and then you push off your hands, and then you like spring yourself. I'm like, don't do head springs, please. Let's stay off your head and neck. And if you're teaching dance, quit teaching those kids head springs, for holy cow. Like it's like we don't want to create these concussions, but the article says the incidence, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. If they've had a concussion, they have an increased risk compared to the ones that do not. So let's go through the notes and talk about just some of the things. And this is going to be a little rough, like I said earlier, but I wanted to go through this. I was looking for something else, and I actually found these notes. And so I just got a few things highlighted in the notes. This is from my time with Dr. Hall in our functional neurology program, and some of the notes that I took in that particular program. A lot of these things you've already heard. I guess I could probably draw them out. A lot of these things you've already heard, but I think if you hear several sentences, that it might help understand what's going on. Okay. Right off the bat, frontal lobe inhibits flexors, inhibits sympathetics. And so don't strengthen quads with kyphotic thoracic spine. So a person that has an increased thoracic spine. So you've got the way your curves are if you've got your nose and your eyes and your mouth, the curve in your neck is lordotic. Then the curve in your thoracic spine is kyphotic. That's the word. And then the lumbar spine is lordotic, and then you get into your sacrum down at the bottom. Okay? So whenever you have the curve and the convexity of the curve is on the back, then you call that a lordosis or a lordotic curve. Um, if you have a curve in the other direction, it's kyphotic. Okay, so what this particular thing is statement is: don't strengthen the quads with kyphotic thoracic spine. That's the first thing. Flexibility is the key, but it starts in the brain. And because if this is over kyphotic, we're going to have a problem if you strengthen the quads. We don't want the front of the legs to be strengthened. It's just one of the things. I want to just read through this. I told you it's going to be rough. I just want to read through this so that we can start to see the connections, right? And there's some connections about the pupil sizes right here. Um, Larger pupil sizes equal decreased frontal lobe on the same side. So if the left pupil is larger when people are lying to you because they're searching for the truth. The right pupil is larger when the dog dies, when they're stressed out, when they're sad. There's an increase. And I started to look. On the Reflex Pro app and see if I could get some pictures of that to kind of show you. But I see that a lot. That's a thing that I see a lot is just have two eyes that are looking back at you, and then do you see the pupil size on one side, and then you see the pupil size on the other side, and the pupil over here is much bigger. Let's give you a blue-eyed person. I see this a lot. And it would be something that just, it would not be, no one would know about. Like, and it would be an indication that you've got imbalance in your brain. That's why we do the Reflex Pro app. We take a 5-second video of each eye with every new patient that comes into the office. We take a 5-second video because when we shine a light in the eye, we want to see what that eye will do. And a lot of times what that pupil does is it will start to constrict and then it will get bigger. Like, it's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to constrict and stay constricted. But what it'll do, especially in the right eye has a tendency of constricting and increasing versus the left eye that constricts down and holds. And it's like, wait a minute. That is one indicator that is so that it would be no one in the world, like in the normal daily activity of most people, would have any idea that there's some sort of subluxation or interference going on with their body that's could lead to tearing your ACL. It's like that right side. If that right side, what the sentence here is, it's when that's that sadness, that's that anxiety, that's that stress, that's whatever that's going on in that side. If it happens on the other side, then if you're left eye, you may be lying about something. You may not be truthful about it, whatever. But I see that a lot. I really do. I see that a lot, and I see it in that right eye. It's hard to explain to people. It's hard to get people to understand. You've got interference in your nervous system if they've never seen that before and they don't even understand what it means. So that's one thing right there. Okay. Increased walking pace narrows stride, with which increases proprioception, which in turn increases axial tone. What does that mean? If you're going for a walk and you have wide steps right there, if you have wide steps, then The reason, most likely, that you have wide steps is because you're not comfortable with your cerebellum. Your cerebellum is not working great. And so you're trying to stabilize yourself by keeping your feet wide. So a person walking with that has the brain first is having those wide steps, right? Increase walking pace. If you increase your speed of walking, so I see people go for a walk. A lot of times, I see this all the time now in my neighborhood. It is crazy to me. I see it every night when Leslie and I go for a walk. I'll see people walking with their phone. They may be walking their dog, or they may be walking their child, pushing a stroller, and be looking at their phone while they're walking. And they're just going at this very leisurely pace. If you go for a walk and you're actually trying to increase your health, and you're actually trying to get something done when you go for a walk, you should try to speed that pace up. Get some movement. Go with that right there, okay? Because walking pace, increased walking pace, narrows stride width. What will happen is your feet will move inside. You'll narrow the stride width, which increases proprioception, which in turn increases axial tone. Because, number one, you're going to walk faster. Number two, you're going to increase that input into the brain, and it's going to be harder. You're going to have more axial tone. The muscle strength around the spine is going to have to increase because your feet are closer together. So the tripod is not really out here wide. Your feet aren't wide. Your feet are closer together, so your axial tone has got to be increased. Okay? Just pieces of information. There's lots of stuff about memory that's here. I'm going to skip that for the moment. There was a couple things right here. Okay. Arms to the side. Anytime you're moving your arms in this outer direction. In the office, we do overhead touches. So that's one of the things that we do. So we're moving the arms out here to the side. In this coronal plane, it relates to the cortex. This relates to the cortex. And it relates to the multifidi. So it relates to these intrinsic muscles that are around the spine. So the cortex and the multifidi. Those intrinsic muscles around your spine, okay? Arms forward is in the sagittal plane, and it relates to the paraspinals and the cerebellum. So when you swing your arms forward, like if you're going for a walk, and you're swinging your arms forward when you're going for a walk, now what we're talking about is a different set of muscles. We're talking about the muscles that are running paraspinally, the bigger muscles, and we're talking about the cerebellum. So we got this, the paraspinals and the cerebellum. And that's one of the things that you can start to understand. It's like, wait a minute, when I have the way that I move my arms is different muscles and different parts of my brain. Like if I move my arm out to the side and I'm moving my arm up and down, then I'm dealing with the cortex of the brain, the upper part of the brain, and I'm dealing with the intrinsic muscles in the spine. But if I move my arm forward and backward, like I'm walking, and I swing my arm, then it changes which part of the brain actually has the most input in that and the result of that. And that becomes the cerebellum and the paraspinals. So we're already starting to, if just by these few sentences, we're already starting to see the connection between the brain and the spine. The brain and the ability to keep our core strength together. that like in it, and it's just with movement. And then my next note right here says posterior lateral disc injury caused by doing something with your arms. So I had a lady today that was trying to put a jet ski in the lake. And her husband, she and her husband both were trying to push the jet ski off of the ramp. And she is a listener to this show, so I love you. Thanks for letting me take care of you. And I hope you're feeling better when you see this show. But she was pushing the jet ski off, and then they had to kind of lift it a little bit. And so she had 1 foot forward and 1 foot back, and then she already had her arms extended out in front of her, and then she tried to lift. And then she heard a pop in her low back, and then she was down for 3 days, and then she came to see me today. Okay, that's exactly what I'm talking about. She did not have a disc injury, but it's the same concept. She didn't have a disc injury because she didn't reach the threshold of the disc injury, but she was on the way to a disc injury. She just happened to fail before she got to the disc injury because the soft tissue failed. The ligaments, fascia, muscles, they failed before she had a chance to get all the way to the disc and make the disc fail. But the point of the information is that she was doing something with her arms. And the way that we move our arms, depending on which plane we're in, is going to have an effect on a different part of our brain and a different part of our back. That's why we send patients over after they get adjusted, and we do overhead touches, and then we do pursuits. We with our thumb, and we're trying to get rotation, but we're also using our arm in this plane that's out here away from us, and we're actually moving our head through range of motion at the same time. Then we'll do side steps, and we're doing side steps because arms and legs have the same effect. So you step with your legs, you're also working your cortex because you're doing those side steps. When you're walking, your legs are going back and forth in front of you, and so now you've got more of this paraspinal cerebellum thing going on. But if you're stepping sideways, then you're changing the input into the brain. And then you can just imagine what is a torn ACL? Like a torn ACL, an ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, that is you're tearing the ligament in the knee. Why do you tear a ligament in the knee? Because you put the ligament in a compromised position, and you take that position further than the ligament can handle. It's like just tearing a piece of paper. I mean, it's the same concept. I could bend this piece of paper. I can bend it, and I don't tear it. But if I go much further than that, it's going to start to tear. Right? I'm going to tear the paper because I took it beyond its ability to bend, and then all of a sudden it tore. Well, what's going on with an ACL or any other ligament? What's going on with the ligaments on the outside of our ankle when we step and roll our foot? Like you step off a curb and you roll that foot. What are you doing with those ligaments? You're taking them beyond their capacity to stretch. And what will happen to them? They'll tear. So how might that happen, and why would that happen in a person that has a concussion? Like why is it 2 times more likely if your brain is not working properly that you might tear your ACL? And what did they say? They said sensory motor disruption, right? That's what the article said. However, recent studies have identified unresolved, impaired sensorimotor function after athletes return to sports. This communication of the brain and the body, it's the communication. Sensory is going into the brain. Motor is coming out of the brain. We're feeding input into the brain. What is the problem with a concussion person receiving and sending information out of the brain? There's damage there. It's not it's not healed yet. And we want to rush the kids back into sports. And I'm not really trying to do a show on kids and sports, even though we could do this entire show on kids and sports. But the majority of us don't play sports. Now, a lot of us have kids that were involved in sports at one time or another, and some of us were involved in sports at one time or another. But a lot of people are not that way. But a lot of people have degenerative knee problems, and a lot of people have shoulder problems, and a lot of people have plantar fasciitis on their foot problems, and a lot of people have degenerative hips that are happening out there. And it's like, wait a minute. If what's going on with this athlete is going to tear that ACL, he's going to tear that ligament in that knee because of the disruption of sensory input and motor output of the brain. And it's not post-concussion is not physically the wiring from the knee to the brain. We're not saying that a concussion is disrupting the nerve supply from the knee into the spinal cord and then into the brain. That's not really what's happening. And it's not disrupting the nerve supply that's coming from the brain back down into the quad and the hamstring and the calf around the bottom of the knee. It's not so much disrupting the actual mechanical nerve. The concussion is messing with what's going on in the brain. So now we have unresolved, malfunctioning sensory motor input-output system, that the results of that is that we lose this axial tone, we lose the muscle tone, we lose the muscle control, we lose the precise tuning of the muscle. And what happens is it just rotates a little. So let's don't talk about the athlete that tears the ACL. Let's talk about the 35, 45, 55-year-old mom or dad that has the degenerative hip, that has the rotator cuff tear, that has the plantar fasciitis issue, the bone spur on the bottom of their foot. Let's talk about those issues. Let's talk about the slow process of what's happening in the orthopedics of the body, in the same way that we would talk about it with the athlete. And what we would find out is our brain's not working right. Our brain's not working right first, and then we end up with degenerative hip problem. It's like, so what if you were 25, 35, 45 years old and you didn't have hip degeneration at this point? What would be the first thing that you would want to make sure that you did to keep yourself from having hip degeneration? Where would you start? You would start in the brain. You would want to make sure that your brain is functioning properly. And how would you do that? You would check your posture. You would check your pupillary light reflex. You would check your cervical curve. You would check the nutrition that's going to your brain. Big things: fuel, activation. You would do wellness things. You would look for all those things, and you would say, look, I want to make sure that I have all of these things in place so that I decrease the chances that I'm going to end up with some sort of knee problem. I'm going to decrease the chances that I'm going to end up with some sort of hip problem. I just want to make sure that my brain is functioning properly. Low axial tone starts first, before extremity problems. That's what I have written in my notes. Low axial tone. This stuff in the middle, these muscles. What does low tone mean? You ever shake hands with somebody and it's that limp fish handshake? Like it's just, there's no There's no squeezing of it. It's just kind of like, it's kind of gross when you shake hands with someone like that. That's low tone versus hypertonic. On the other end, some of those guys, they shake your hand and try to crush your hand. That's too much tone. There's a normal amount of tone for a handshake. Both people have the same about contraction, and it's a normal handshake. But some people have a very soft handshake. That's low tone. Here's the statement. Low axial, just in the middle of your body right there, your core, low axial tone starts first before extremity problems. And then we're going to cover this because we're just about out of time for tonight, but we'll talk about a few more of these highlighted things in the notes so that you can understand, look, I got to keep my brain healthy so that I can keep my body healthy. I appreciate the article from McPherson and those guys that made sure that it was published. But if you keep your brain healthy, you've increased your chances of keeping your joints healthy. And you increase your chances of not hurting yourself doing some sort of movement. That's all I got for you. I know it's a little rough, but thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. You guys have a great night. Please let me know if I can help you.